Hey, Al, can you hear me? Leave a comment. Good, I can notice. If you guys can hear me, just give me a thumbs up. Excellent. Still going Well, I'll just kill the music. It's 3 o'clock. Time to get rolling. All right. If you can hear me, I was working on that earlier to make sure there wouldn't be any problems today. Oh, don't put that there. Hey, guys. All right. Can you hear me okay? Okay, very good. Hey, Daryl, welcome. All right. Excellent. Everybody is here. Have all kinds of cool things to go over today. And for once, I actually wrote them down. Most of these are you guys' suggestions, but we'll chat about whatever you want. Hola Maria Valeria, ¿cómo estás? Garfield, Unshalak, Raymond. All right, gang's all dialing in. Alrighty. Well, I guess we can get rolling here. I'm going to be alternating eyeglasses as I go back and forth from the paper. One thing before I forget, some of you guys have probably been on Mike Mashat's channel, Celebrating Aviation with Mike Mashat. And he is going to be, hey Bruce, Pursuit, Mark, hey, all right, here we go. Hi, Steffi. So Mike Mashat put up a video today. He is going to be starting his own live stream about starting off with desktop display models, vintage ones, and that's right up his wheelhouse. I plan to join in for that because that's as you guys may know, Maxsmodels got started selling desktop display models, and because I was collecting them, it was the only way I could afford to do it. If you see me craning my neck back, it's because these are progressive trifocals, so I have to like that to see the computer and then like that to see the paper. Okay, so make a little check mark that I mentioned Mike's channel, so you guys might want to watch that video and give that a look-see. He actually goes into some of it in that video, but he's got a lot more planned. Companies like Topping and Precise used to make those models, and I'm actually aware of a criminal investigation, a national security criminal investigation that took place years ago because somebody stole one of the desktop display models of, I think it was a stealth fighter, or it might have been one of the drones. But apparently these model companies, when they do this stuff for the Defense Department or the Defense Department contractors, a lot of it's still secret. So they're making models that they can't show to anybody. And somebody stole one, probably just thinking they were stealing somebody's toy airplane, and it wound up getting like the FBI involved. They made a couple of arrests. So, never underestimate the value of a good model. Oh, you saw it. Good, Adam. It was good, wasn't it? Mike has been there, done that kind of guy. He definitely knows his stuff on that. And he's been down there in Southern California for all these years, right in the heart of where a lot of that activity takes place. Has Barry signed in yet? Because I want to say thanks to him. Barry, if you look down here on the desk cam, Barry sent me this. It's so man, when you use all three of those lenses, you can like see the molecules in your fingerprint. But of course, he has a great little sense of humor. So let's see if I can. Oh, time to switch glasses again. Yeah, I think I just put it in the. Let's see. You guys will see here in a minute, scrolling on your upper right. That's just a little slideshow, but you'll see a box with a note, and you open it up, and there's another box with a note, and you open it up, there's another box with a note, and then there's the thing that's in the box. And we're going to talk about that picture also in a little while. Hello, Railroad. Norman. Oh, thank you, Marie Valeria. My niece is watching. Okay, right there. I open it up. It says, anticipation is making me wait. And you open that up, and there's another box inside with another note. I always thought gifts should be an adventure. That's why my kids hate me at Christmas. And open that up, and there's another box. And inside the box was this. And so I have no excuses now that I can see at the micron level. Ooh. So, thanks to Barry for that. And if I see his name pop up here, I'll thank him again. So there was something I thought was kind of interesting. Hey, Chris, welcome. And you guys may remember a while back, I did I actually recorded it on the fly. We would at the end of one of my videos, I had tacked on a picture of Jack Linwood's painting of the Aurora KC-135, but it didn't have a tail boom on it. And I'd actually seen on the Box Art Den, which by the way is having its own problems. They apparently have had some issues with, I think it's Yahoo, so they're going off and doing their own thing, but they're still around. I'm sure we've all been on the Box Art Den, but anyway, somebody had noted that, hey, you know, there's no tail boom on the 135. How are we going to take on fuel? A pair of F-86s are coming in. Well, F-86 never had aerial refueling capability. But then one eagle-eyed person sent me a picture of an F-86 on a tanker. And what it was we're going to be talking about the frame packs later. That's why I had the Johan pictures up there. So I had to do my research on that. And apparently when aerial refueling was new, they had taken F-86, ripped all the guts out of the nose, sealed up all the gun ports, taken the guns out, and just put an adapter just to go see if they could hit a tanker, even though it couldn't take on fuel. Although the Navy version of the F-86, the F-2J Fury, did have a wing probe and drogue system. But anyway, what I was shocked at, I was flipping through my old videos the other night. That little video that it was like 2.5 minutes long that I made on the fly after doing just a little bit of research just to address a comment someone made has had over 11,000 views. It just never amazes me what video you'll make that'll get all kinds of traction, and you never know. You put your heart and soul to a video and nobody watches it, and then you make something on the fly and it winds up getting all kinds of traction. It's just quirks of the interweb. I just thought that was. I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. But if you guys haven't seen that video, it's like 2.5 minutes long, and it just talks about. It was literally a video made to address a comment someone made. It actually made a video to address a comment about something I'd made. Like, it's just kind of the outro comedy tongue-in-cheek thing at the end. And the whole thing, I called it the Aurora rabbit hole, and it just took on a life of its own. Hey, Jeff. So anyway, on to more fun stuff. I just thought it was a kind of a cute thing. It was worth mentioning. One of the questions you guys sent, which I think we can all relate to, especially if you built some of the later Novo kits, is at what point should a manufacturer retire a mold? Because they've gone too far and the quality of the mold is degraded to make a good build. Molds, retiring a mold usually comes as a result of one of two things. Either it's literally worn out, which means it's a popular mold. So there's a lot of them made, and you can usually tell when they're wearing out because you start getting a lot of flash on them. But the other thing is if they're stored improperly and they get some sort of surface rust or something. Normally they're greased, so that won't happen. Hey, Modeler X. If when you're dealing with something like beryllium copper, which of course is a toxic metal to deal with, then it's probably not quite. I don't think that stuff rusts as easily, but it still has to be stored properly. Obviously, if you have a derailment like the Aurora molds did, and some of them get decapitated. But the other reason they retire a mold is because the thing just didn't sell, and it's precious metal. The beryllium copper ones, a lot of them got melted down because of their value as a precious metal, and so they get retired a lot quicker if they're made of precious metals. A steel mold that doesn't rust. And then that one's, as long as it lasts, and they can sell them. But if they can't sell them, remember they have to store these things. And if you're a big company that has hundreds or even thousands of these things, that can become an issue too. And even steel has a scrap value. So it breaks my heart to think somebody might scrap a steel mold, but they will. And eventually they will just get worn out if you're making enough of them. It's also the quality of the steel. Some molds are not made out of, if they're not planning a big run, they won't use the expensive metals. So you might get one that's, especially for resins and stuff, those things are retired after about 50 shots. And then they have to use the pattern to make another one. Alan Urey at Fantastic Plastic was telling me he never gets more than 50 out of a mold because they just degrade too quickly. But they're also very inexpensive molds to make because they're made for resin kits. But as far as I'm concerned, when you're getting as much flash in the thing, and it's time to redo it. Some of these molds do get actually kind of refabricated. There are things you can do to a mold that's popular, but that also depends on who's running the shots. Nick Argento was telling me that the Strombecker molds, and those things are old. I mean, they go back to the 50s and 60s. The Strombecker molds are some of his most popular. So he doesn't want to retire them, but they're so finicky. You have to get the plastic at the right temperature. You got to cool it at just the right rate. You got to get all the pressure set exactly right, or you wind up it won't fill in the crevices and everything. So he actually usually runs those himself personally. He personally runs the machine, gets everything. It takes him 4 hours or more to set up one mold for the old Strombecker molds. They're nightmare molds. The ones he hates dealing with most, but the kits sell. And if he tried to make new molds, I'd say he's looking conservatively 40, 50 grand. For that, he'll put up with the aggravation. Yes, yeah, Adam, they frequently are. Hey, Bob. They actually are frequently put up for sale, and that's how a lot of these companies wind up repopping the kits. Now, a lot of times the molds aren't that bad off. John Kitt over at Scale Model Garage just did a video with a model from Tomy, which, if ScaleMates is correct, that model eventually went to Hasegawa in the 90s, and Hasegawa is very particular about what they put out. So the mold, despite being somewhat old, it must have been in good shape. And of course, they can reverse engineer them. If the mold is too far gone, they can use it to take sort of a shortcut to make a pattern to make a new mold. So depending on where you're at and what it's made of. All right, time to switch glasses again. Is there a point where a manufacturer should retire a mold because it's gone too far in the mold? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I had that one down twice. All right. Great news. The gas truck and the Chevy stake truck are about to be released with new clear windows. No word on the Ford pickup, but I would expect them to do the same for it. Oh, that's great, because that's my only gripe with those kits. I know back when they were originally made, that was the norm. But we live in different times. And so let's keep a good thought that those will come up. I don't know if they'll be available as spare parts, but then again, if you got any kind of vacuform equipment, you get one, you can make all the windshields you want. Still, for the B26 Marauder and the Super Fortress, they're long overdue. Monogram's molds must be hitting. Well, it's not only how old they are, because Monogram did, according to Pete Vetrian, Monogram did an excellent job of storing their molds so that they didn't have any decomp or anything take place, or erosion. And it's really on how many they made. If you're starting to see that the finer points, the edges and everything are getting rounded and you're getting a lot of flash, it may be I'm not used to seeing your hair this neat. I'm not used to wearing it this neat. Today was bath day, so I took a shower. I even brushed my teeth. See, isn't that much better? Let's see. But I remember buying you said the B26? Yeah, I remember buying the flak bait B26 back when I was a kid, and I guess they must have just gotten a crate of them because they were selling like 2 for $1, so I grabbed a bunch of them, and that is an interesting airplane. One of the things when you guys asked about was if you guys have put in the comment section here about model shops past and present, the one's gone and the one's still around. So, man, I hate to think, when I was a kid, the big place to go it was Carter's Sporting Goods in Tallahassee, which was a sporting goods store, and it was the only thing even closely related to a hobby shop. But I actually went to the Squadron shop in the one they had up, I think it was Wheaton, Maryland. I used to live not far away, and I felt so blessed, but I'd go in there and spend an hour because I had a budget, and when you've got everything right there, you're like, It's more like going to a museum. I'm reading Chris's comment. Yeah, they're Gary, you shouldn't have sniffed through your headset. Yes, there are things they can do to them, but it takes some pretty specific skill sets. A lot of these skill sets are getting hard to find. You don't have the tool and die companies like you used to. You don't have the people with the skills. Now, everything's done on a CAD cam now for the most part, but the one of the problems that they have that several people have told me about is that is all the molds really need in the case of what you're talking about with the Matchbox Brewster Buffalo. It may just need a polishing, but this isn't like polish, like waxing your car. This is a very specific kind of polishing with jeweler's tools and everything. And if they do that, it's fairly expensive because it's extremely labor intensive and the people have to know what they're doing. But a lot of times if they polish them, that'll make a lot of the problems go away. And there are other things they can do. You have to do maintenance, but some companies, they just keep squirting them out as long as people keep it. It's all about the Benjamins. They don't really care about the quality of the product. And that's sad. Yeah. In fact, since you mentioned that, if we go down into the desk cam, if you guys notice this old Banshee. Now, I don't know if you saw my last video, but I took this thing down so that I could hang up the Typhoon, the Eurofighter. And this thing was on top was caked in brown stuff. And talk about fixing molds and kind of same thing, but fixing models. I managed to clean it up a fair bit using isopropyl alcohol and this extremely soft cloth, which is one of the cloths that's used for storing silverware. And you can still see there's turn this light down just a little bit. There's still some blemishes I need to clean up, but trust me, this thing is a lot better than it was. It became, I was amazed how hard I had to work to clean it up. Now this hangs from the ceiling. You guys have probably seen it in the Tarbus. And apparently, and I've had this happen with models that are on the outside of shelves in the house. Yes, William, it is definitely becoming a lost skill set. What happens is apparently the dust cakes on here, then it gets moist and it turns into, like a clay and hardens, and then more dust, and it's like layers, and it winds up, you're not trying to get dust off anymore. You're trying to get this almost impregnated plaster off of it, or it's like it makes a clay. And you can get it off. I used isopropyl alcohol because the paint's been on here long enough, and I think that was enamel. But it really pays to clean the models every so often so you don't wind up doing heavy duty maintenance like I'm having to do on this thing to get it presentable again. Now this kit I did not build. It's one of them I got in a lot, and but I did, I liked it, so I repainted it and redecaled it. And by the way, you'll notice my little figures here are standing up. Don't embarrass me, boy. I had bought some of you guys said to get that stuff. This is tacky wax, and every time you move them, though, you got to re-scoop them. But you just, this of course is going to be for the diorama. Scoop a little bit there, and you got to make sure. Okay, you got to make sure you get both feet. Quit embarrassing me. There we go. Slow down and take a second. And so, oops, a little bit too much there. But $4.99 on Evil Bay. And I suppose you could probably use a soft candle and do the same thing. Now it sticks, every serve is different. It sticks really good to the paper. So this guy knocking on the door of the Tarbis isn't going anywhere. These guys on this smooth tabletop service are, it takes a little more to make them stick. But, so I'll be using that. Well, that's what it says. Tacky wax. So, and another thing, rebranded. I forget the name of the stuff I was told to get, but I couldn't find it. But this apparently does the same thing. By the way, this is my 1/16 Tag and Tiger, which clearly I have not painted. It's still in out-of-the-box colors. Not really doing anything with it. Just didn't have much for the table today, so I thought I would put it up there just for show and tell. Yeah, those wargaming figures got 1,800 of them. Good Lord, I don't have that kind of patience. I'd go mad. Absolutely mad. Yeah, makeup brushes, those are good. Any soft bristle brush, yeah. They usually use a soft bristle paintbrush. And, by the way, I don't know if you guys got your fine scale modeler yet, but I had mentioned this earlier. I noticed that the reader gallery got a lot bigger. For a while there, it was like 2 pages. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages. That's I was just talking about air-to-air, that thing about the F-86 air-to-air refueling. And it's a pretty cool diorama. Okay, next thing on the list. So, oh yeah, we're still talking about model shops. Why would the diorama with a gray alien knocking on the Tarbis and a UFO hovering over? Well, that would be more of historical. That happens to me every Friday night when the Meepsortsians come down, but I'm not supposed to talk about that. Yeah, really. I wouldn't have my models in cases, except that my better half thought it was, she wanted to protect them, so she picked out some really nice glass cases, and then that was one I got from the hobby shop that unfortunately was closing, which dovetails with that was Hobby World, which I missed terribly. Although I can't complain because Hurricane Hobby opened up even closer to my house. So yeah, that's the model that I'm that way with the Vostok. I swear I'll finish it someday. But I think about it. I think there are at least 5 hobby shops I've seen go away here in Jacksonville. There were 2 Hobby Worlds, one on 103rd Street and one on Blanding. They're both gone. Their leases didn't get renewed on the first place, so then they moved the last one. And just before they closed, I actually did a video on it. He said that, yeah, he'd lost 65% of his business to the internet. So, Leisure World, I think I might have mentioned them in the video on Hobbycraft. I'm not sure if that was the one that had some kind of Wonderland Models Edinburgh. Yeah. I think one of you guys has mentioned Wonderland before, I think. Hi, Alessandro. Welcome. Oh, there's no late. There's no early. This isn't a classroom. You guys come and go as you like. But there's 2 in Tallahassee that went away. The chain stores are kind of immune to it, but I really can't call them, hobby stores. From Rigel studying the Earth Monkeys. Where are you from? Well, I'm from near Tallahassee, but I live in Jacksonville. So how are things on Rigel? He's from the planet Wriggle. By the way, speaking of stars, I was just watching a documentary last night that star, there's Bellatrix and all the ones in Orion. And apparently the one we call Betelgeuse is actually, its real name is proper pronunciation is Betelgeuse. And I was like, I don't see an R in it, but okay. So now you can sound cool in front of all your friends. Orange Grove Hobbies in Gulfport, Mississippi. Leisure World was. And the internet killeth and it taketh away. Hobby Town. Every town, it seems like everybody has one called Hobby Town. Would you buy a model maker why would a model maker a pre-made kit? Depends on what you're going to do with it. If you're just going to give it to a kid or something, let them tear it up, or if it's something that you need for like a display you're doing. But generally speaking, the glass. Here they are.
Not those, the special ones.
Oh, these?
Yes, I want to try them.
She who must be obeyed wants to see the. There we go.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, I didn't get any video, but I was chasing the cat around. I brought the tank in on RC, and she who must be obeyed said, "Why aren't you chasing the cat around with that?" I was like, "Great idea." He's still not here, is she? Because I can't resist. Well, who can resist a Corsair? By the way, a model Corsair, Revell model Corsair, had a small appearance in that TV show, Madam Secretary. Her chief of staff or whatever needed something to relieve stress, and him and Tim Daly were talking about building models as kids, and they both loved the Corsair. So you see him bringing out oh yeah, and when Mrs. Mac speaks, when Mrs. Mac, what?
I'm gonna try them. I'm gonna.
She's off to her doll empire to go work with them right now. So, okay, might have to buy another set. But those were a gift from Barry. And Barry, are you here? Oh no, I think Barry had to work today. I think he sent me an email. He had to work. So the Beatles. Okay, I'm just reading the comments. Yeah. I think we all have our hobby shops that we lament. But I got to be honest with you, a couple of hobby shops that went away didn't break my heart. The people that owned them were cantankerous. There was a train store. That guy, God, look at the word up, curmudgeon, and I'm pretty sure his picture's in the dictionary. And another fellow I know who was a bit cantankerous, but not nearly as bad, but just never smiled. A hobby shop's about the atmosphere. I mean, of course there's etiquette, but it's just, I really think I should open Max's Hobby Shop and Bar. You kids go find it, build some models. Daddy's going to sit here and drink. Remote control cars. Okay, it's a chain. There is one of those remote RC car stores here in Jacksonville. It's small, and I think it's still in business. It may not be, but that's all he does is RC cars. No kit models, no airplanes, nothing. That's it. And he kept his doors open for a long time. I think RC cars are more popular than RC airplanes by a pretty wide margin. Now it's funny how you think what you're in is big because it's what you're in, and then you realize it's actually a smaller part of the hobby, and soul crush. You mean my hobby is not the center of the universe? Ow! Well, Maurice, you open up one there, I'll open up one here. Oh, thank you. Another question we got was, kits you have converted, either genius or disastrous results. I made, when I was a kid, I cut up a 1/72 scale MiG-21 to make a spaceship for a home movie. And yes, I made 8mm home movies as a kid. A kid outside with a flashlight and 8mm camera and a model on a string, trying to do his knockoff of Star Wars. And it actually turned out pretty good. That was the first time I remember actually kit bashing a kit. And then I found out if you've got wheels and you've got sprue, you can make a vehicle. I had pretty much a box of any parts that are left over, because you watch some of these sci-fi movies and maybe it looks like something out of 50s science fiction or the last season of Lost in Space, which is just ridiculous. But the point is that you're doing something with it. You're making something. And, you put some paint and decals on it, and sometimes it's reasonably convincing. Yeah, bringing some. That actually, even when I go to Hurricane Hobbies, I see people coming in with the whole repair thing, and he's not really a repair shop, although he can help them with it. But yeah, I am sure. The thing is people have to understand, if they buy an RC, a car, or whatever, and they go out and tear it up and they bring it back to the shop for money, they can help you fix it. This is a business, but they're not. It's not their job to replace what you did for free. It's last man out. It's funny you should mention that, because there is I think it's a dual contra rotating job with the pusher, and there's been talk about calling it the Cheyenne too. That thing moves too. Apparently, it can freewheel the rotors and just boogie, and it also, like the Cheyenne, has wings. You guys, for those who aren't familiar, in the 60s they played with something called the Cheyenne, which is like a Cobra with wings, but it has a pusher. It has a pusher rotor also. I got built a model one. And remember, if you want to get helicopters from Atlantis, get them now, because they're probably not going to be in production much longer. And I'm banned from saying lie, but just trust me on that. If you want them, get them, because I think when supplies run out, they really do. Yep, Greavelys, that's right. I don't know why I'm coughing so much. I don't have the COVID, don't worry. Yeah, solder gun on kit models doesn't work too well, unless you're trying to damage it. It's funny. One of the problems I have with kit bashing, it's very difficult for me to acquire a kit and then deliberately cut it up. But some people make some really interesting stuff with they do, and it's not because I mind cutting the kit up. It's because I'm afraid I'll screw it up, and then I've wasted good plastic. Well, that brings up a question. Since I've already got the picture in here, so let me bring this picture up, because that brings up something I was going to ask you about, guys, anyway. All right. This is my quasi-kit bash of the Typhoon. You can tell there's not a Typhoon flying that has that missile arrangement, but I wanted to slap as much fuel and ordnance on it as I could. I trimmed off some of the little fins down on one of them had broken off of the intake, so I just shaved them both down and created my own squadron markings. And I don't know if that really constitutes a kit bash or not. It's like a quasi kit bash. And I could have swore I took another picture of it. Just going down the pictures I have here. Kit bash, maybe. Frame pack table. But of course, I also put the fast packs on it, but they came with it, so I don't really consider that. It's in the spirit of the kit bash, but I don't really consider it a true kit bash in the truest form. And let me just go. Here it is. Now there it is. And I used reference photographs for the canopy framing and stuff, and because it just had the clear piece, so I used decal stripe, which was so much easier than trying to tape all that off. But there is, to my knowledge, no Typhoon painted like that, but I just thought it looked wizard awesome. And the loadout is just a mix of what I had. I tried to keep it symmetrical. So I'm not really sure that constitutes what you call a kit bash, but it's a little hard to tell in this photo. But it has a behind the rear seater, you might be able to tell it bulges out, and that's the conformal fuel tank. So that doesn't have the tapered waist, wasp waist of the actual Typhoons. And apparently that was something that was, yeah, really, you can do a jet, you cannot have too much fuel. That's why I added a few more fuel tanks. I'm calling this I'm calling it, what did I came up with a name for it. This is not the Nightcrawler, the Night Terror. That's it. And what it is it's in my mind, it's an escort for deep interdiction bombers. That's why it's got so much bloody fuel. So it can go a long way, and it's just loaded for bear, world of hurt. Get them close, get them far. Get them in the middle. I'm just reading some of the comments here. Okay. So let me see if you guys are talking about low-level snake or lizards. Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah. Now, just speaking for myself, and this is a personal opinion, simply putting putting a paint scheme on an airplane that's to your liking that may not have been a real one. I don't know if I would call that a kit bash if you're building the kit as the kit. But if you're changing it up, I don't know. Everybody's got an opinion, I guess, on when it becomes an actual kit bash and when it's just a modification. Not that it matters. As long as you're having a good time, that's what matters. How much takeoff weight on that Typhoon? Well, remember, they can take off empty and then tank everything up in the air. Which, by the way, I don't know if it still is, but that used to be the way it was done, because a lot of those airplanes could not get airborne if you filled them up with everything. They just roll off the end of the runway. And they learned, and of course, they can thank. I'm sure some of you guys have heard of 42nd John, the famous fighter pilot, but he was the guy that learned about energy management and learned the physics. And long story short is that a lot of our jets up through the Century series, they were long with short wings to go fast, and they could do one thing well, go fast or go high, but they couldn't do everything well. And a lot of times they were so freaking heavy that they had to take off with, if they were carrying a big load out, they had to take off with partial fuel, and the first thing they could do was go hit a tanker. I don't think the Huey 2-pack is going away. I think the Jolly Green and I don't think the Hup's going away either, but I believe the Jolly Green and I think the Cheyenne are going away. And you might see some of the kits getting renamed. Something like B-24 Liberator might be changed to World War II Heavy Bomber. And I'd love to tell you why, but I promise I'd keep my cake hole shut on that. I will tell you, of course, lawyers. Maybe not. We'll see. Maybe they'll be able to keep them going. But a kit of a Cheyenne. I mean, I hate to butcher a nice kit, but a kit of a Cheyenne. Now that could make an interesting kit bash, because you look at it, it already looks like it belongs to the set of Star Wars. Take the rotors off and put some vertical thrusters up there or something. Yes, telescope replicators asking, did the old original Aurora molds end up at different companies or just one or two? Schmeyer has a couple. Yeah, that is a story in its own right, and I don't know the whole thing, but apparently some were destroyed at the orders of Abe Shikes, but I believe those were mostly figures. He didn't like being the figure company. Some were destroyed on the train. Some of them were old Comet molds. A few of them are still around. A lot of them got damaged. Some of them got damaged in the train wreck. But a lot of them, okay, what was left of the Aurora molds, because they could sell off their molds before they went out of business. I don't know how many they did, but or even if they did, but the molds went to Monogram. Monogram already had a program set up when they got there. Of course, a lot of them didn't make it. After the train wreck, they said the manifest was missing a whole bunch of molds. The damaged ones, of course, were chucked. Well, set aside. Some of them might have been actually reprocessed. They really wanted the World War I aircraft, and I think if it was the cars or something else, they had some stuff they wanted. So the first thing they did was it was like a 3-step process. Go through the molds and see which ones are salvageable, then see which ones are on the list that we want to keep. Put those over here, they'll go back into production. The others, get rid of them. Most of them went into storage. Now, if I understand correctly, and I may have some of this backwards, they stayed in storage for years, and then various companies Monogram, Mattel gets Monogram. The whole thing changed. But Revell of Germany winds up with a bunch of this stuff. I think they owned it, but they didn't really want the mold, so they didn't move. So even though they were owned by a German company, most of them pretty much stayed in Illinois. Then the new Revell starts. They get some of the molds. Those are Revell molds, not Aurora. You asked about Aurora. But they go off to China to get popped, and that's what Revell's making today. But then the Germans decide to sell off the molds, but they only sell them as a lot. A company buys them. The company that gets them only wanted some of them, decides to let the rest of them go, and then they wind up changing hands, and that's about all I can say about that. But you can probably guess where they went. And I really got to stop talking about that, because I promised the guys I wouldn't talk about it. But you might see a lot of cool stuff in the future, but it's a commitment to get any of these things back into production. And even if you have the molds, that's only part of the equation. I do know that they are investing some money in the molds they are producing to get them polished again, so that you get nice, smooth, glassy finishes on them. And it helps that Atlantis is run by guys that really, just like Glencoe, it's run by people that love the industry. They love what they're doing. They're modeler builders themselves. That really makes all the difference. Yeah, they're working with old molds, but for a lot of us, we like that. I mean, they're nice models for the casual builder, and they're having some of their own molds cut also. Atlantis does cut some of its old molds. History of round 2, I kind of covered them. Round 2, you have to watch the video. I mean, it took so many turns. Round 2 started off as, that just comes in from so many different vectors. The early internet played a role in that. But the fellow, and God, I can't believe his name escapes me right now, that started round 2, which, by the way, round 2 seems to be focusing more on cars now. So there may be some more molds of non-vehicle stuff, non-car stuff, being acquired by other companies, so we could see that happen. But don't forget also, now this is another thing that's real important about this. Even if, let's say you want to make something that Aurora owned, and you find out who's got the mold, they may just lease you the mold, or they may shoot it for you. Yeah, if you'll pay to get the mold cleaned up and commit to $20,000 or $50,000, we'll make it for you. You can start making your own models if you're willing to have some. Some companies do that, some won't. So there's also that. That's why you see some of these companies only last a year, and like you go to ScaleMates, go, so and so made this kit, and then here it is sold by this other company for a year, and then it's back to another company. Well, they probably just contracted them. It's doubtful they bought the molds and sold them, but they probably just contracted them. That's what was the name? Somebody asked me about. It was an offshoot of Revell that lasted 1 year. Forget the name offhand, but Advent or something like that. But it was actually Revell, but they wanted a brand just for the big box stores that wouldn't taint their reputation. And they came up with a whole new logo and everything. And after like a year, the whole thing fizzled. So they're like, nope, nobody knows who they are, even though they were actually Revell. And I don't know if they were more or less expensive, but apparently it was so the big box stores could have a sort of store brand, I guess. And I'm sure I'm getting half the details wrong on that. But Yeah, I'd love to get a Aurora 707. I do know that Glencoe's got some plans to re-release some stuff with some stuff added to it, some value-added features. And when those the store, I plan to grab two, and one's not coming out of the box. Oh yeah, Lan. Yeah, Carter Sporting Goods. I was talking about that earlier. That was where I would go with my birthday money when my parents, because I live 20 miles away in Quincy. That's actually where I'm from. And then I would go to Carter Sporting Goods with my birthday money. And man, I walked out of there. I had the Sterling Fokker triplane and balsa and a couple of big plastic kits. And I thought, man, I own the world. I'm like 13, 12 years old or whatever, and I got all these big models, and grown-ups built. I was so proud of myself. Just walking out of there with the big Sterling box, I felt like a man. And other things you'll never hear anyone say again. I wonder what my best kit bash was. Good gosh, I don't even remember. That MiG did turn out pretty well. Okay, here's a trivia question for you. My wife catches me buying kit model molds. I'm going to wind up with my head in one of them. Best and worst kits. What surprised you or disappointed? I think I can answer those two for me. The biggest surprise I ever got, let's face it, Lindbergh was not known for making the grandest kits around, okay? And the thing that used to tick me off was I always had these big boxes because I used a uniform size, and you open this dinky little model in there. You have a box this big with a 1/72nd scale biplane. And I'm like, all the parts rattle down on one end. And that used to cheese me off. I felt like I was being lied to. Glue Trooper brand. I like that. But one day I went ahead and got their SE5. And I could not believe the model went together without a single problem. And I'm like 9, 10 years old, and I built a World War I biplane without losing anything. I didn't have any paint for it, so it was like bright yellow. Because that British pilot wasn't scared of the Jerry. Bring it on, the Bosch. Yeah, say the same thing about aviation, Charles. How do you start off? How do you make a small fortune in aviation? Start off with a big one. Big box fraud. Yeah, I like that. That's what it was. Max Boblet. Oh, I'm sorry. You weren't telling me to do that. You were just. But that SE5, I really expected another crappy Lindbergh kit, and it really was. In fact, I bought another one, and it was just as good. So I was like totally surprised. Worst kit, you guys have probably seen the video. That freaking Space Command Center. Ugh. I had high hopes to make this cool thing. It's going to have this big thing hanging from the ceiling on the Tarbus, and next to the Dauntless. I already had plans for that, and it was such a disappointment. And I don't count the launch umbilical tower because it's a paper model, and I knew it was going to be a mess, and I am going to finish that. Speaking of that, I'm halfway made a decision that I'm going to go ahead and just quit trying to screw around with all these origami that goes on the lower section, just start building the tower. And those lower sections, over time, I'm probably going to start using wood and plastic to actually make those parts because the paper just doesn't fold worth a crap. It looks horrible. Actually, believe it or not, when I first got that tower, my intent was to use it as a plan to make the tower out of brass rods and plastic and styrene. And when I saw how complex that thing was, I had a serious rethink. And I have seen people that have scratch-built launch umbilical towers, which is 100 times harder than building the rocket. I stand in awe and salute them. Bend anything? I came real close with that station. Actually, you could say that Space Operations Center was bend, except I kept it because it's got a lot of parts and framing that might come in handy for something else. I'm never going to bend it, so I'm going to say it's bend. But instead of going in the trash, because I don't throw away styrene, you never know what you're going to need. The Starfix kits, of course, are pretty rough, but they got a little better over time. Mustang's not any worse than a Lindbergh kit. 109 if they get that nose right, but. The Revell's an Edward now. Okay, well, that makes sense. Huh. I have gotten a few warped ones, yeah, for sure. That's a bummer. I'm in the box and major components are warped and don't fit. You're trying to heat and straighten them out. Tricks of the trade. What technique do you value the most or have yet to try? I just started trying to use a stencil to put blotch patterns on the German camouflage schemes. You know how like a lot of the measurements will have that little blotch. The spine of the airplane, top of the cowling, will be that dark German green, and it'll go gray, and then they'll have all the splotchies. And no matter how often I try to, at some point the spray gun's going to spit or do something and mess it up. So I went ahead and cut a little stencil, and that's working pretty good. Using a stencil for blotchy camouflage. Bought a few crappy Italeri models over the years. I've heard overall pretty good things about Italeri, but Italeri, as I was admonished to say Italeri. CC Leak, that doesn't shock me because they're out of, I don't want to knock China, but they're out of China and they don't have a sterling reputation. Okay. I honestly don't know if I've ever built an Italeri kit or not. I think their later ones are better, but that's usually the case with most companies. What other techniques? Of course, basic stuff like using, dipping your clear parts in floor wax so the glue doesn't fog them, and detacking tape. Have a piece of glass or mirror, you can put a piece of tape on, pull it off before you put it on the model, so take a little tack off so it doesn't rip off the paint. Although I have to admit, Bruce sent me that frog tape. I've become a believer. I had never used that before. It's easier to handle. It's tackier than the blue painter's tape, but it seals a lot better, but it comes off, and so far, knock on wood, it hasn't taken any paint off. Yeah, every company has its own, gets styrene from a different vendor. So depending on that vendor's formula, they may have some input. A company like, to me, it might be proprietary, but also if you have an operator who's not running the machinery correctly, if I remember correctly, and I might have this backwards, if you cool it too quickly, you get shrinkage and it might make it brittle. And if it's a styrene that gets liquefied by heat, injected under high pressure, and then cooled and then pulled out. There are a lot of places you can go wrong, as you guys probably know, of all of your chemical catalysts, light, heat, pressure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're pretty much dealing with most of those here, so you get one of them off and you wind up with some iffy. And of course, I'm sure a lot of companies just use cheap plastic. Thanks, Bruce. What are the tricks of the trade or tips? I did buy 3 different needles and nozzles for my little spray gun, different sizes. I put the big one in, and I actually haven't gone around to using the little ones. I should practice with them because, they've got some air guns you can. But, here's a little trick. I'm sure you guys know this. I imagine most of you should clean your airbrush after every using. Every time I forget to clean it, I come back, next thing it's locked up because that acrylic gets in there. And there's a lot of every airbrush out there has somebody showing you how to, to clean the thing. You don't have to strip the thing completely apart. But I bought some of that Tamiya spray gun cleaner. I don't know what kind of mystery oil they put in there, but that stuff works. And sometimes when the thing's locked up and I can't even get the needle out, I'll put some of that in the hopper and give it a couple of minutes, and I'll hold it nose up, so that it'll dribble back down into the channel. Just a couple. Eventually, it works its way into everything and starts working again. So, and I use that stuff because it's expensive. I usually just clean it with, if I'm using acrylics, I usually just clean with isopropyl alcohol. And that odor-free mineral spirits is great for enamel. And I would say odor-free mineral spirits is my favorite cleaner for non-acrylic paints. And heck, you can strip your model with it, and I understand it won't damage the plastic. It does not attack the plastic. So, odor-free mineral spirits, isopropyl, to be a paint gun airbrush cleaner. Really? Well, that's brilliant. I did not know that. DeCam's saying that needle size is for thickness of paint, not detail. I thought a smaller needle would give you a thinner line. Well, now I do have to go play with it. Automotive reduce. See, now we're getting some tricks here. While we're on that very note, it's not so much a trick of the trade as a warning. Now, you guys are probably already aware, you've seen enough of my videos, know what a klutz I am. I have started to realize I'm getting better about it. And did I take a picture of that twatter? The twatter window story. I got to tell you that in just a second. In fact, that leads into this. Okay. All right. These are the windows to the Twin Otter. And as you can tell by the instruction sheet, they go in individually. Now, one thing I have learned is I am often very careful not to damage something, but as soon as I'm done, I'm like, ooh, I got that finished. Yay. I let my guard down, and then I start moving around without thinking, and that's when I knock crap over because I have a brush sticking out of a bottle here or something. I have to keep backing into stuff. I have to stay focused, not now that I've got this thing done. I'm not done yet. I'm still in a danger area where I can knock stuff over. Well, let me show you the other picture of the twatter window if I think I have it. Okay, I thought I had another. Oh, well, doesn't matter. So, I had put these windows in, and they go in without much argument. They're slightly beveled, so they only go in one way. And it's still hard for me to believe this even happened. It's like the universe is playing a joke on me. But I have the model, because the halves has not been mated yet. I have the model laying on the table flat, so the windows just drop into place, and I use a little bit of Tamiya glue, right? Just let it capillary in there, give it 10, 15, 20 seconds, works like a charm. Getting in there with no trouble. Well, I'm doing a window, and I touch it with the brush, and the window, the glue gets on it, which isn't a problem, but then the window, just with the slightest touch of the brush, just ping! I'm like, I hardly touched the freaking thing! And it goes over on the other window and lands on it perfectly and glues itself to it. I'm like, you have got to be freaking kidding me. You could never do that on purpose. And I'm sitting there trying to get them apart and not launch one of them off the table. And I'm giving serious consideration to making this model without the windows, because at 1/72 scale, not having windows in a model actually can make it look okay. I'm like, nope. But I was able to very carefully get it apart. But I mean, how did this happen? Literally, the window is laying in a recessed bevel. I touch it with the little brush on the Tamiya, and you have somewhere there is the ghost of an angry model builder going, whoa, watch this. Unbelievable. Glue and paint, favorite brands, and worst. Worst is the non-toxic testers that smells like freaking old lemons. Best, I've had really good luck with the Tamiya products. I know there's some other people like other stuff. Although I frankly don't think anything quite bonds like good old testers, because it's just acid. It's weld. I haven't used any of that weld, although I know some people live by it. But I've had pretty good with the Tamiya glues. What about you guys? Yeah, I've started using white glue for Pursuit for the clear parts. But one thing that I have learned is if I'm going to do that, I pretty much got to let it set overnight, because that stuff, you never know when it's going to dry. And don't put too much in there, or you'll have, because, well, you guys already know that. Mm-hmm. Okay, you brought that up, James. A long time ago, I bought a bottle of that liquid clear. It's a white milky stuff, and you put it in a window, and you let it harden. You put a little more, and you build it up until it's a solid thing. And then I realized it was nothing but watered down white glue. You can fill in clear parts. You can't have trouble making a curve or anything, but if it's a flat window, that's a thought. You just gave me an idea. I've already put the windows and build the model. I'm sure I'll just use the tape or the. Those windows are small enough. I'll probably go ahead and use the liquid mask on them because they're pretty straightforward. Nothing fancy. But if I hadn't done that, that'd have been a thought. It's a time-consuming process, but it does work. My Skymaster, I lost a window for it, so I built up a window that way, and it worked. That's interesting. Plastic weld is chloroform. Ooh, I better not have that stuff. By the way, I think I know one reason I might have been sick yesterday is it made matters worse if I didn't mention this, is had the glue up and I leaned over, and I just happened to inhale deeply while I was leaning over the glue looking at something. I caught a pretty bad whiff. Ugh. Grew up using Plasti-Weld, was awesome stuff. Used capillary action. Okay, Plasti-Weld may be the one thing. I don't know if they still make it, but future floor polish is invaluable. Mm-hmm. Well, plastic, I like my acrylics. They're just easier to clean up. They're molecularly tighter, smaller. One of the problems, in fact, I think somebody asked us one of the questions on here, since you brought that up, is we have problems with humidity down here in Florida, obviously. And it is not hard. It can be a little tricky down here, even in an air-conditioned room with all the moisture. Sometimes it's tricky to get a smooth coat. The paint just wants to orange peel. And I'm sure you guys have some techniques for dealing with orange peel, but I had to completely, when I did the TD kit bash, I had to completely scrub it down, sand it down, and start over again. And the second time I did it in acrylic and got a much better coat. What I was surprised was I bought some of that pearl. And I didn't see that the pearl was any better. The clear coat, I didn't see that it was any better than the regular clear coat. I may have misunderstood. I thought pearl would be like brighter and shinier, but it's not. It's pearlier. Sold with plastic stuff. Those orange displays. I'll have to try some of that. No, I'll detail with acrylics, but I don't like putting them on with a brush in a big way. If you do, you got to dilute them to get them to flow. And the acrylics will dry pretty quick. It's easy to wind up putting a big, it's semi-dry paint. It's I think enamels do paint better. And I've never used Flow Cool, but everybody seems to love that stuff. Homebrew has a lot of fans too. And I usually mostly use Tamiya acrylics in the spray gun. When I do use enamels, whatever it is, I make sure it's that when I'm done, I've got it set up so I can just set it aside for overnight and let it harden, because acrylics dry pretty quick. Enamels, I don't care what anybody says, you really need to let them harden overnight. At least that's been my experience. I know the 50-50 mix and everything's kind of the standard rule. Yeah, you know what? I actually bought some retarder, and I keep forgetting to put it in there. But I used retarder on the big Mercury that I did, because I was doing I think it was a base plate with acrylic, and I was like, I've got to have more spray time, and it worked. It came out with a nice even sort of sienna backside. I actually went to the museums and looked at the real capsules before I built that, and did my homework on that one. It's one of my better builds. I have not. Flocal is lacquer. Okay. I have not really used lacquer that I'm aware of. I mean, I have, because I have some, but I know there's a difference in lacquer and enamel, and that sometimes they don't react well. The worst mistake I ever made in that regard was on the C119, which is right up there, so it survived. I had to strip it. I had covered it with something silver or aluminum-y, And I think I'd run out. I was like, well, I'll use a different, and the two things went right after each other. Fortunately, they did not attack the plastic, only each other. It literally blistered up where you just wipe it off. And I was like, holy crap. I also painted a pair of plastic shoes for one of my wife's dolls with some kind of enamel, and it attacked them. 3 months later, they were still tacky. They never hardened. That little rubber astronaut that came with the Mercury capsule, I hadn't put him in there. I forget what kind of paint I used on him, some kind of silver paint for the spacesuit, and it never dried. It's sitting on the shelf now, and you can touch it, and it's still tacky. That was 10 years ago. I'm just reading this. Do not add the retarder. Do not add the retarder to the original paint jar. Okay, right, I think I remember that. I had to put it in a separate jar. Yeah, I think I did, but thanks for the reminder in case I decide to use some. I've had real good, Ralph. I've had real good. Wait a minute. I've had real good use with the decal softener on decals, but not always. I have Tamiya and I have Microsol. I'm not sure which one's better. Probably the same formula. Decal softener to flow improver for acrylic thinner. I usually just use isopropyl. Interesting. Use flow pool to make ink for pens. By the way, it is true that Rust-Oleum did buy a tester some time back, and there is talk that they're going to put the testers line out up there. I guess probably just not selling enough of it. Paint. I actually fly down to the Dominican Republic. Well, when I fly. And we go into Santiago. And on the way in, there's a big factory that we pass over. And it's a paint factory for, like, I think, house paint. But what it makes is the base. And what paint actually doesn't have any color. It's like a milky color, just grayish milk. They have to add pigment to it. And this place just makes the base, the paint. And when I grew up in a hardware store, and we had a lot of that stuff. And when people pick a color, we pull off the base, and then they have the little thing with the knobs. And you pick the setting on each color, and you mix the paint for them. And you put it in the paint shaker for a long time. We're going to get it. And that's... I have no idea why I brought that up. It just made me think about that. But I remember why. Because you see the size of that factory and you realize what goes into making paint. It is a major, major process. And I guess unless they're going to sell just tons of the stuff, it just isn't worth their time. They're a big company. They got bigger fish to fry. But IPA works good with most acrylics. Okay. Paint and glue, favorite brands, worst. I think we covered that. IPMS, any local clubs, or you to prefer to lone wolf? Well, you guys are my club. I definitely lone wolf it here at the house. The local Hobby Lobby does have had a modelers club until the beer bug hit. I went one time, there were 3 guys in there, and one of them had brought in part of a diorama. That was it. They were just sitting there BSing, which is fine. I mean, it's as much a social club as anything else, but I didn't go back. I have nothing against clubs. I think they're great, but I don't think any of us want to go someplace and listen to the local know-it-all judges. Advance. Hello, Brad. Oops. By the way, I deliberately put these out like this because this guy's technically 1 to 141 scale, closer to the other ones. I wanted to give you a little forced perspective there. A lot of you are asking, I'm going to do forced perspective. As long as you have the taller characters forward, you can put just a few inches between people that are within about 10%. And it pretty much goes unnoticed because that's within the standard deviation of humans in general. And now, if you move them up, of course, it becomes more noticeable. But again, because they're within the standard deviation, it's still not really a problem. You get much more than a head's difference, though, and it starts to show. I mentioned the show this morning. I'm sending this box and the decals to a gentleman who had asked for them, and he offered me, which was very nice, he offered me an Aurora AH1G Cobra. I'm like, well, I'm not going to say no to plastic, but so it doesn't have a canopy. I'm like, don't worry about it. I'll make something work. And that made me wonder. I've made canopies and things like that in the past. I didn't know if anybody had any particularly favorite ways to do it, whether blow them or vacuum form them, or to make curved clear parts. Some people they'll whittle down a mold and vacuum form it. Others will just cut up something off of something they bought that has the plastic bubbles they can shave to fit. More light, and let there be light. Oh, thank you, Chris. Yeah, I've gotten in the habit of doing that. I definitely test spray before I go. Actually, I used to side of the table for it. The side of the table has been camouflaged about 300 different colors. Well, about 30 different colors, about 300 times. Well, Garfield, it won't be the one with the sweater vest, I'll tell you that. He came from the Cessna 182 model. I didn't realize... that doesn't make you a misanthrope, just being a lone wolf. What was it? Brain fart. Oh well, couldn't have been too important. But I have two things coming, and I got to make some stuff out of wood. Not the G model. You're thinking like the S model. The G model, which was the one that served Vietnam, that's the one that has the rounded bubbles. And I actually have an AH-1S on the shelf. And when I was in the Army, the National Guard still had Gs, although they were getting near retirement. We had the S's, and they're substantially different helicopters, although they're all based on the same platform. But the modern old kit canopy, not a luck with. Yeah, I can understand that. The G models, one of the reasons I had that bubble is the guys could move their head better, they could look around, see better, because it was all about visibility. And the glass on the G's or the S's really isn't truly bulletproof. They flattened it, although it does have a slight curve to it. They primarily flattened it. They wanted to reduce the glare and reflection, or at least that's what they put in the literature that we got. Plastic shade was off. My models weren't using. Yeah, you see that exactly what Plastic Slate put down there. That's kind of my reticence. That's why I've made it a deliberate point to keep this a fun channel and not a you did it wrong. Listen to me. I know everything. I mean, always happy to hear people's hear what they got to say, but nobody here picks on anybody, and that's why I like it here. Keep it a happy place. We're all here for fun. Mm-hmm. My wife made an excellent lunch today. So let's see. What's next on the list? What magazines do you use or read? Well, I was just showing you my... I know this. Some people have their issues with it, but it's what I got. It's available, and I enjoy it. Fine Scale Modeler's my magazine. Best manufacturer for product, service, or aftercare. Okay, I have a candidate, and that's round 2. Now, the guys Nick told me point blank at Glencoe, he runs everything as a kit. He does not keep spare parts or decals. So people call up, I need a canopy for this. He doesn't have them. Okay, it's just not the way his operation is set up. I don't know about Atlantis, but I do know that round 2 actually has on their website, if you need our instructions or something, and I may have told you guys this. Now, some of you, God bless you, when I said I needed an instruction sheet for the Stagecoach, one came in the mail, one was emailed to me. I mean, we were covered. But I had already also sent round two because by the way, that Stagecoach was originally a Marks kit, but I had sent it to the Wings and Air Power are great. But I had sent them an email on their thing about, and sure enough, they emailed me beautifully scanned the whole Stagecoach instruction. So round two, from what and again, the fellow that started round two is he's a modeler also. He loves what he's doing, but he's kind of the big dog in town these days. And I mean, he's got Polar Lights and Revell, Hawk. He sold a lot of the Revell. I'm sorry, Monogram. But the point is, he's got a bunch of stuff, and I'm just glad that he's a model person. He's about providing the quality. But I think round two is about to lean heavily on the cars. So you might see some of the stuff that they were making made by other people. And all right, you guys, I understand. Well, to me, is in Japan, so I don't know how good they are. But of course, they make more than just kit models. But I've heard some good things about them, but I have never had to deal with them. My old Revell, yeah, haven't heard too many great things about new Revell, but I didn't say that. Yes, this is a 1/16. It's a Tegan, and this does not have the metal tracks or the metal bottom. It's got some metal in the body, but it's and the main drive wheel, but the tracks are rubber band tracks. And I got a couple of videos up there that I posted with that thing. Well, that's good to know. Ah, Hans Peter. Hello. Well, I'm glad you made it. We're just chatting up a storm. And by the way, there was... I had said something that turned out was not correct again. I had made the mention that every one of the Saturn V's was painted different. I need to make a huge correction on that. After Apollo 7, they were all painted the same. They were painted different during the test program, but they painted them the same afterwards. So although the Revell kit has a few, because it was made off an earlier model, it does have a few blemishes on, or a few mistakes on it. The one most people point out right away are the Ullage rockets, Ullage motors, not rockets. The Ullage motors, it has 8 of them on the interstage ring instead of 4. But if you've got the paint scheme for one after Apollo 7, you're good to go. Believe it or not, it sounds silly, but that black paint turned out to be a real problem on the real rockets, because when they had the bigger, thicker bands on them on the earlier ones, it was causing heating issues. The thing was so big with all that liquid fuel that the black would absorb enough heat that it would cause problems of cooling, which is why they changed it to the way it was on the later models. Girls in Panzer, man. Yeah, I don't know who came up with that, but that was a bizarre. Yet, if you guys have never seen Girls in Panzer, it's one of those things that you can't not watch it, and you feel like, man, I'm either a real tank fan or a bit of a perv. Yeah, Girls and Tanks, baby. That's exactly what it is. Boom, 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 bada boom. So I thought about getting an Urai or was it Kura Marine sticker for the side. See if anybody would catch on. Um, but there is somebody out there, I forget the name, but he revoiced and parodied Girls in Panzer. And it is hilarious. He did about 6 of them. It is hilarious. I mean, wrong, but hilarious. And oh gosh, Happy wants to go look that up. It is so funny, but it's not something I'm putting on my channel. But holy jeez. But the if you are building rockets, fortunately they're very well documented. I found a museum. I may have mentioned this last time. I found a museum quality Saturn V that's 1 to 144 scale, and but they're $1,500. And I thought, that money, I'll detail it myself. But I saw the amount of detail they put in there. You'll put another $200 into the rocket to make it that level. And theirs are partly die cast, so they're a lot more robust. Oh yeah, Girls in Panzer, Miho rocks, man. I don't think you're going to. It's sad that it's really hard to build a model better than some of the stuff that's pre-produced. And I was watching model trains get made, and really good video out there. And the I thought they stenciled them or something, or silk screened them, but they don't. They take the of course they have these. It's in China, and you see these people face down, elbows up with the doing the markings. But they have a stencil, and what it is, it's a brass mold and brass. Okay. And they wedge the model train into it. And the brass, because brass can give an incredibly tight fit, and the brass fits so tight that they can just spray it right there and pull it out. And no runs, no leaks, no errors. Of course, they do this all day, so they know what they're doing. It's something like that Saturn V is made by somebody like Taomi Nation or something. Okay. Now I got to look this up. Just a second here. Is it Bandai? Yeah, I think it is Bandai. Yeah. There's the thing you were talking about with Adam. Yeah, Bandai Tamashi, Shoryuken Tamashi. That's it. And it is incredible. I honestly don't think I could build one as good as the one they make, and the amount of detail they have in there. They have all the computers inside on the rings and everything. You can take it apart, display the inside, the outside. They have all the hoses and the pipes and the plumbing and everything. And I'm sure someone could build one as nice, maybe even a skosh better. They have all the markings. I mean, they have the little tiny, S1C and everything down on the little tiny script on it. Hey, Bill, welcome aboard. Yep. 21 steps with a new metal mass for each coating. And it's amazing. As I'm sure you guys know, they have brass slot cars and brass model trains. I was at a train show some years ago, model train show, and there was a DX40, which is basically two locomotives welded into one. and it was unpainted brass, and it was $1,200, and that was 10 years ago. Obviously the reason behind brass is not only you get super high fidelity, but it's heavy, so they ride well. Same goes with slot cars. Imagine the more resilient level of detail on the thing was absolutely insane. But no, not for $1,200. But they were rugged, I'll give them that. Hey, Jar. Let's see what we got here. Okay, we got everything on the list. Okay. What do you guys want to talk about? Yeah, but you got people that'll pay a small princely sum for those brass locomotives. I mean, they have a religious following. No. Edmonton, I've been there. I've been to Edmonton and I've been to Edmundston. Oh, frame packs. That was something I was going to talk about. This is an invention of our friend John Hanley over at Johan. I don't know if you guys are familiar with frame packs, but if you will look at this, you will notice, and as far as I know, Johan's the only one that ever did this because he did have the patent on this, but the trees, or runners, are mounted to each other both horizontally, vertically, and depth-wise so that they cannot be crushed on top of each other. And sometimes the parts even interlock between each other. The idea was to reduce or eliminate breakage, and apparently it worked. But I still don't know how they did that, because there's no way they would had to have put those together after they shot the trees. I just don't see how there's no way you get that in and out of a press, which meant adding another step to it. Well, General Mills could offer that 747 because General Mills bought a bunch of kit model companies. They got confused. They thought the models were toys. So General Mills is and yes, General Mills, the food company, the cereal company, they are very involved in, or were very involved in kit models for quite a while. In fact, General Mills is why it was such a stink over Aurora with the horror things, the guillotines and all that stuff, because when the mom started marching, General Mills had kittens because they were like, what do you think you're doing? Was that? No, I'm sorry, that was Nabisco. But trying to keep it straight, man. I've done so much research on these things that it all becomes a blur after a while. Okay, the General Mills and General Motors. General Motors actually paid for Johan to set up the molds, $250,000 to set up the molds for the turbine car, which of course John Hanley was not about to turn that down. That was a free mold of a popular car. It's still probably their most popular kit today. It's one of the few of them I think that Oakey Spalding was able to keep into production, which is why it's still getting repopped from time to time. But General Mills, though, was involved in actually owning companies, and Nabisco, and had Aurora, and I'm getting it all confused now, but I was surprised how many food companies got involved in the model business, and it doesn't seem like a natural fit. Well, technically, Mark, if they use it, I suppose they're paying somebody royalties for it. That's probably expired by now. But supposedly, frame packing like that, and it's called a frame pack, apparently frame packing like that actually does keep the damage level down substantially. Most people I know familiar with it have been real happy with it. They said, yeah, man, none of the parts are broken. And to show you how tolerant my wife is, that is our living room. They didn't have enough room on the shelf, so she lets me put them on the table. All I have to worry about is the cat. Most of their cereals taste like plastic. When we're done molding the models, we mold the corn chips. Then we go back to molding the models. We use the same mold. Yeah, that's true. Needham, he's right. A lot of these food companies have so much cash, they're just looking to put their money into something. And it's like, okay, we got money for that. By the way, I had mentioned that Embraer. What about Embraer, Jeff? Are you kidding? I'm a fan of the Red Green Show. Of course, I've heard of duct tape. Handyman's friend. What was I going to show you? Oh yeah, uh, yeah, that's right. General Mills on the MPC. That is correct. That's exactly how that came from. Uh, where's the? Let's see what something I was going to show you. Never miss an opportunity to go hang out and look at a good model. You guys know I'm huge into the space models. I mean, this is what I want to talk about. Now, clearly, that is a model of a lunar module, right? Yeah, well, of course it was. Fun Dimensions, that's right. Fun Dimensions is the toy division. Now, if you're my age, you might remember this from your TV. That is an actual model, and I'm guessing, one of the monogram models. This is actually what NASA aired on television. That's a screen grab that I got. This is actually what NASA aired on television when Neil and Buzz landed on the moon. Obviously, there were no camera set up, so they had this diorama set up. Now, I just mentioned, to me, a tape's okay, Decam, but I'm actually becoming more of a fan of the frog tape that Bruce sent me. Now, this diorama that they aired, and I had known this, but I'd forgotten about it. And when I saw that thing build a little bit together, it reminded me of it. A lot of people know that when Neil and Buzz landed on the moon, when they got down low, a lot of guys, if you're space fans, you may know they got the 1202 alarm, the 1201 alarm, which are computer data overflow alarms. And they were long, they were coming down past their landing point ahead for a boulder field. So Neil punched in the program that allowed him to fly the lunar module manually. And he just piloted it across a crater in a boulder field and landed with about 16 seconds of fuel left. But there were no transmissions at that time because they were just too busy flying the lunar module. But no one in the news or media or anything knew this. So when the countdown clock went to where they'd landed, they showed this. But when this model got shown, they were still flying for about another 30 seconds. So they would have crashed and burned, and the world would have been shown this. But they did land safely, of course. But I just thought that you can't talk about models without talking about NASA's lunar module. The lunar module is on the moon. I'm like, wait a minute. How did someone get a camera outside? I'm like, hey, that's just a model. I got one of those on the shelf. For all their might and all their power, NASA was reduced to using a model. And guessing it was a monogram model. Because the ever seen lunar module is a lot more detailed than that. Just thought you guys would get a kick out of that. Don't go there. Capricorn. I knew you guys were going to jump on that. Oh well. It was too good not to mention. And like I said, that's my nightstand. This stuff's real important to me. In fact, above my head to the right, okay, let's see. If I turn my head to the right and look up, that's what I see. That's right here at my desk. I built the Snark, and I built the Apollo, and I built the Tremulous. The B-58 and the X2 and X3 are desktop display models. As I mentioned, Maxsmodels started off selling desktop display models. And That Lindbergh kit, you talked about kits. They asked earlier about kits that were better than expected. I built 2 or 3 of those Lindbergh Snarks. That's actually a pretty darn good kit. And big, too. That's big 148 scale. And so that's definitely one of Lindbergh's. I don't know if they got it from someone else or it's one of their own, but they were definitely on their game on that one. Actually, a friend of mine actually worked on the real Snark. And the Snark program is how they found out that Ascension Island was in the wrong places on the maps. Buzz will punch it. Yeah, he will. That's why he's a American hero. I know he went. That kind of brought up what I was talking about this morning. I don't know if you guys saw this morning, but if I was a millennial, I might have trouble believing it too because of the world I was raised in. But most of us are, I'm sure, over 40, and we remember drinking from a water hose, riding around the back of a pickup truck, and getting a red roll of paper explosives and a hammer. In our movie, in our world, this kind of risk was, of course, you take risks. It's just we rode bicycles. Our idea of protection on a bicycle was, holding on with both hands. I doubt it. I don't even know. I doubt anyone makes cap guns. I doubt anyone makes caps. I'm sure somebody would raise hell if you did. Dad's 6 cousin. There you go. Side note, Neil Armstrong, long before there was an internet back in the early 80s, quit signing things because he found out that there was a secondary market and stuff with his signature on it. But the one thing he would always sign, because he'd been an Eagle Scout, is if you became an Eagle Scout and you got your award, if you mailed it to him, his secretary would take it in and he'd sign it and mail it back to you. And I think that was the only thing he would sign. That's why you see most of the artwork that's been signed by the astronauts. It usually doesn't have his signature. Seatbelt. What's a seatbelt? Well, as Jay Leno pointed out, and I can remember this, I remember people rolling up their seatbelts and stuffing them between the cushions where they'd be out of the way. And he thought about salesmen would show you, because it was put in there as a mandate, And I can remember, the people thought about the salesman would show you how to roll it up and tuck it out of the way, so you didn't have to be bothered by that thing. And I also remember the shoulder harnesses that didn't have the inertia reel. You reached up, you just clipped it on, and just and adjusted it. Of course, everybody adjusted it kind of loose. Of course, it was for the back then an airbag was a nickname for a politician. Now I have percussion caps, or had percussion caps, but that was for a cap and ball pistol. I had an old Walker 1847. Thing weighed 7-inch barrel. There's a reason they call them horse pistols. It was funny, I blew up as many models as anybody else and watched them melt. Wah. But now I don't know if I could bring myself to blow one up. Like, it could be saved. I could use it for parts. I could get bash. Do I have, Chris, do I have to answer that? Actually, in my case, I decided not to go with a parachute. It was a hang glider. Well, what I called a hang glider. Triangular sheet with bamboo framing. Fortunately, I didn't hurt myself. Just enough drag to keep me from breaking anything. You're from our generation if you've heard the following phrase. Get down off the roof. You know you're not supposed to be up there. Hooah! But they were okay with me skydiving. Yeah, Adam, that's kind of it. They really are. Well, of course, we grew up in an era where if you had a cast, everybody signed it. It was plaster, everybody signed it, and it was like a badge of honor. I got 5 stitches. I got 7 stitches. I broke my arm. Kids wore their injuries like battle wounds. Oh, Barry. Oh, Barry. I don't know if you just got here. I was thanking you earlier. My wife I was showing the pictures that you posted, and hold on, let me put them back up. So Barry, but she saw that because she does the doll. She goes, "Let me see that," and I think it's hers now. Let me. Yeah. There you go, Barry. I was showing everybody your gift inside a gift inside a gift. Oh. You blew up a 410. Well, I'll tell you what, the Germans wish they'd blown up all their 410s. 210 was an abject disaster, and the 410 was a disappointment also. Yeah, the mouse or P1000 Rata. I have a model of the Rata, and several little dinky models of the mouse. Speer was the one that killed the Rata. He was like, "There's no way we're wasting." The guns were going to come off one of the German battleships or heavy cruisers, and I think battleships. And he was like, I forget if it was Admiral Scheer or which one, but he was like, "You won't even be able to take that thing anywhere. Even if it would move 10 miles an hour in a straight line." It was the most ridiculous idea ever. And Hitler just loved his grand big weapons. Oh, they'll be to plug holes in the battlefield. Dude, no, that's what artillery's for. No, 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 stop it. And a lot of people argue they shouldn't have made so bloody many Tigers. They would have been better off just making more Panthers and Mark IVs. Because you know what 4 Sherman tanks can do that a Tiger can't do? Other than run 30 miles an hour? They can be in 4 places at once and be counted on to run. Where are you going to stare? Yeah. Oh, they still make roll caps. Okay, figures to be made in China. Yeah, the 1500 to Land Cruiser and the 1600, which was this P1000, I think, was the Rata, and the 15 or 1600 was a big artillery piece, and then they had the mouse, and they had the E100, and yeah, Panzer IV was good. It was their Sherman, and they'd have been better off with another 1,000 of those, and had a good gun on it. Not the greatest armor, but a good gun. I don't know about that. I'll take your word for it. The Sherman did have fairly narrow tracks, which would have slowed it down off road. But they usually move from point A to point B on road. And of course, it's whether or not they have those duck bills on it helps a little bit. But I'm not sure if the HVSS, the horizontal volute system, tracks were wide or not. I know it's funny if you build a model Sherman, you can see this, especially if you build one of each type, the vertical volute and the horizontal volute. But the vertical volute, which has like the upside down Y, the little wheel on top and the 2 on bottom on the Sherman, that it has the track guides going down the middle of the track, and the of course the wheel goes on each side of it. The horizontal volute system, the one that has the goes like that has the horizontal tube for the volute springs in it. It actually had the track guides on the outside, so you could replace I'm sure most of us have seen the Chieftain's website, and I think I asked him this question, but I believe you could replace an entire side. Now you'd have to replace, I think, the drive wheel and the idler wheel, but it would not be impossible to have a vertical volute system on one side and a horizontal volute system on the other. Although I doubt anybody ever did that. But the nice thing was, of course, the Sherman, all the volute systems bolted onto the outside of the tank. Now that ate up a lot of internal space, but repairs were so much easier. They say a crew could swap out an entire volute system in 20, 30, 40 minutes, throw on some new track, and off they went. The Sherman was a piece of farm equipment, basically, and that's exactly what they needed at the time. Something that you could repair, that was reliable, and when it broke, you could repair it easily, or just throw the piece away and slap another one on. Very modular in its design. Of course, it had about a dozen different engines, because they could not make enough engines. a lot of people have asked how come Shermans, even when they had the like the multi-banks or the inline Cadillac engines that had a lower profile, why didn't they lower the tank? And that was answered by American industry outright. We are not modifying the production line just to make the tank sit 8 inches lower because this particular subtype has a different kind of engine. That's going to screw up production royally. Nothing was allowed to slow up production. So, although they did have to make some of them a little bit longer, but that was much easier to accomplish. And if you're a model tank builder or a Sherman builder, then you're probably more familiar with the subtypes than I am. But I have tried to stay on top of all the different Sherman variants and everything, and I just can't. There's just so freaking many of them. And let's see. I think I went over all the pictures that I had pre-selected. Yeah. So what else we got, guys? Talk to me. The single guide pen on the HVS meant you didn't need a crane or what? Yep, that's right. Yeah, the T-34's big advantage, of course, is the super wide tracks, and the sloped armor was a mixed blessing. Yeah, it did. 30-degree slope definitely made it more likely to cleanse a shot, gave you more protection. But then again, there goes a lot of your internal volume. And I've never personally been inside a Russian tank. People I know who have said it's a very crude, difficult. I mean, those tanks are physically demanding to drive. But Sherman, unfortunately, those T-34s were, I mean, that tank's still relevant today in some parts of the world. Well, one of the things the Israelis did, if I'm not mistaken, I know they did it with their half tracks. A lot of the Israeli vehicles were, okay, so you do have to do some welding, so they didn't line up. Okay. But well, I think the Brits liked the multi-bank, and it was really an interesting concept. How do we get more power out of a little engine? Let's drop a bunch of them and basically make a radial engine out of it. That engine always intrigued me as a very resourceful way to handle a problem. But if I'm not mistaken, at the Bay of Pigs, I believe the Cuban invaders had some American M41 Walker Bulldogs, which of course is a light tank. It's got a decent gun on it, but they were no match for the old T-34s that the Russians had given Cuba. They just, had too much armor and that little light tank. It couldn't survive its own gun. It certainly wouldn't survive the big Russian gun. And I don't know if the Cubans had 3485s or not, but if they would have been doubly screwed. Because that T-34-85, that they finally put a real 3-man turret on it, that big gun, so that long barrel. That tank, even today, is not something you'd want to trifle with. I think the multi-banks are smooth, also. No, tanks in general don't have much room. And the first time, believe it or not, now I was a kid at the time, so it wasn't this big. The very first tank I ever got in was an M3 Stuart. And I fell in love with that thing. I just thought it was cool beyond description. But I was 15, 16 years old, and it was, it was tight, but we were kids, so we were. Yeah, against T-34 armor it would have been. But yeah, there's no such thing as a roomy tank. Maybe was it T-28, that big bunker buster thing they built one or two of and never fielded, or something like the Jagdtiger, which, because that's not really a tank, that's a assault gun or something, whatever you want to call it. But and when I was in the Army, they taught us that Russian tankers had to be under like 5'6". One reason Russian tanks had such a low silhouette was because they basically built the tank for 5'8" or 5'6" tankers. I mean, make the people smaller, you make the tank smaller. It's an odd logic, but it works. And it's true that something like a T-34, even a T-34-85 or a T-55 or 62, wouldn't last very long. Well, we saw in Iraq against, M1s and modern American armor. But, and there's always a but, not everybody fights the American military. Or, if you're in some second or third world country where the other side doesn't have any tanks or anti-tank guided missiles, or doesn't have any modern ones, then a T-34 or T-55 is still a very, very relevant vehicle. And if I'm not mistaken, they're both still in service around the world in various places. And don't forget, you can also upgrade a lot of these things. Now they're putting stuff like trophy systems on and everything that they can stop a lot of incoming guided missiles. But yeah, and there's also, and I forget if it's Paraguay or Uruguay, still uses the Chaffees, the M24s. And it's the only country that still uses a World War II tank, because I'm pretty sure all the T-34s are post-World War II designs. And yeah, and I was an infantryman, trust me. They go, here's your law rocket. I'm like, I'm holding this little 66 millimeter tube. You think I'm going to knock that thing out with this pop gun? Yeah, I might detrack it. First off, I fired a law. It's hard as heck to hit anything. It's got a very crude sight on it. They go, well, you're shooting at a tank at close range. Well, that's why the later laws, if you notice, actually have pistol grips on, because they realized that old one that like Dirty Harry used, and the Enforcer, whichever one it was, where you clunk down, guys were pulling low. When I fired mine, it actually went up into a tree. Blew the hell out of the tree though. I was shooting at a plywood board with a truck drawn on it and trying to use the sight. And well, apparently the way they had it set up, I don't know if they had the dimensions of the truck were drawn too small, because went up and the tree was put up against the tree and the top of the tree exploded. Well, I may have hit the target. I don't know. It was a big poof of gray smoke. By the way, the explosions are not these big orange fireballs. They're like, boom, and there's a huge, there's a momentary flash where there's a huge pile of gray smoke. And you got to wait for the wind to blow it out of the way, see if you hit anything. Law, add any tank weapon and replace it with a disposable bazooka. Yeah, that's about all you're going to get. But the laws were actually turned out to be real popular in Vietnam for busting bunkers. Same thing the RPGs were popular for. And, when people invent a system like that, they invent it with a purpose in mind. But the world doesn't care about our plans or what we make things for. But invariably, these systems usually wind up being handy for something no one anticipated. But you know what? Useful is useful. If tree murder, that's me. I'm guilty, man. I've killed more trees than pay a local paper mill. Fish tanks. Greasy, good. Bring them on. I keep Greenpeace away from the house simply by slathering my front walk with pig fat. Yeah. Bridges, rivers, a lot of Russian tanks can snorkel, because I want to turn a tank into a submarine. The Wolverine, yeah, that was a good M10, yeah. I like the Jackson. We have a guy down here in Florida that has his own little collection. He goes to all our vehicle shows, and I've actually got a video of him on the channel. He's got the Howitzer Sherman. He's got two Shermans. I forget which one the other one is. He's got a M7 Priest, a Hellcat, which is cool. That thing's fast. And he has a Jackson. And he also has a 105 Long Tom and the motor tractor, and all fully restored and operating. And he's got all the guns in him are active, because he fires blanks out of them and everything. He's got the destructive device licenses from the ATF and everything. So these are actually fully operational. And of course, all rigged up for blank. The machine guns are all rigged up for blank fire. But I only fired one. I fired a bunch of the sub calibers, but I only fired one law, and that was rare. Most guys never fired any. And T-54 surplus, that didn't shock me. There's
one of our guys got to fire a an Dragon at a Califax range, and it hung up on a bush on its way to the target and just blew up before it got there. I'm like, guys, I know this shit's expensive, but we really need to practice more because we go to shooting war shooting like this. I mean, we're the cops couldn't shoot straight. Yeah, the Autocarious book is considered a Bible for a lot of people. It's also a good way if you're modeling tanks to get a lot of the details right. It's sad though because I've gone to some museums and when you start, if you're a model builder, you have a pretty critical eye about detail. If you're a World War II model builder, and you see a lot of stuff that you realize the museum is just painted wrong. But I mean, you're not going to tell them. But yeah, good tanks are expensive. Armies are expensive, and but what did Lennon say? Quantity has a quality all its own. Stormtrooper, yeah, pretty much. And graduates of the Imperial Stormtrooper Marksmanship Academy. Speaking of which, do any of you guys? I had the repairman came over. Yeah, that's right. The Marine Corps is getting rid of their tanks, which I think they only have. They only have like 3 battalions or something. Isn't that many? And I was just having this discussion with somebody yesterday. But I guess the new Corps commander wants to go light. His attitude is, we're infantry for the Navy. We have certain missions. Tanks just aren't part of that. And I'm like, yeah, they're not part of that until they are. And apparently a lot of the Marines, they're giving the tanks to the Army, and some of the Marines are going with them. They're like, no, I'll go be in the Army and stay in my tank rather than be a leg Marine. So, oh well. When you look at this equipment up close, you realize that a lot of this stuff, a lot of this World War II gear is, like I said, it's farm equipment. It wears out. All these things were made. No one thought they could be driving 70 years later. They were designed to run, keep replaced bearings, get blown up, get run over a mine, get thrown in, melted down after the war. No one had any idea. I'll guarantee you, in 1945, nobody knew that a Sherman tank could be worth $500,000 or whatever one costs today, and that people would still be building models of them. So, but it's great that we're keeping the history alive. And yes, yeah, Rick, we were just talking about that. The new commandant wants to go light. He wants to get rid of the tanks, and they're going to the Army, and so are some of the Marines. But I think they're giving them the option. I heard the British are, and it's one thing to have a branch of service, but to have an entire national military without tanks, that's pretty scary. Yes, the M551 Sheridan. In fact, this actually goes back to my time in the military and my brother's time. My younger brother was a navigator on a Starlifter during Operation Just Cause, and he was dropping a Sheridan, the M551, because it was the only airdroppable armor we had. Now, I have a friend of mine out at the RC Club that was a Sheridan crewman. He can tell you all about it. But yeah, a lot of the stories you've heard, that it had a very problematic vehicle. Not as bad as the old 114 Recon vehicle, but that POS, oh God, what a disaster. But the Sheridan had a lot of problems. It had aluminum armor to stay light, which meant it wasn't going to stop much. They did get splits in the armor. They did have at least one crewman killed by a gun malfunction, a breech open during firing, I think, or something to that effect. They had some ongoing problems, partly because it was a Shillelagh missile system and a cannon both in one. So if you had a switch in the wrong position, you could like crochet the breech and fire, and something like that. I forget what the exact problem was. Anyway, but the Army kept 8 of them and a ton of spare parts just for the 82nd Airborne Division, so they'd have some kind of armor asset. And he dropped one at Just Cause, and it was designed to be airdroppable and light, and it was pretty fast too. And if you were up against just light infantry, and you had infantry support, it was really a handy thing to have, like they had in Panama. But you did not want to pick on the armor with it. And of course, that was a 154, 152 millimeter Shillelagh. That was a pretty big gun for a small tank, which I think was part of the problem when you fired the missile. It wasn't a problem because it's a missile. But that system never worked. It was eventually removed, and they just wound up using the gun. Well, that big old gun, like boom! Apparently, the whole thing would rock backwards. It was, but it was, but it like I said, It didn't wind up getting much the way they anticipated, and it actually had some use in Vietnam where the lightweight helped, but it still had a good breaching around. It still had its uses, so wound up being used in ways it wasn't anticipated, but it still had use. Now there are some vehicles that are just absolute disasters without a saving grace, and I cite the M114. It looks like a little trimmed down M113, but the 113 is actually a pretty good vehicle. And in fact, the 113, even though being bigger and heavier, could outrun the 114. The 113 had. There's a couple of documentaries online. I recommend you go watch one. They had all kinds of mechanical problems, way underpowered, weren't very fast, couldn't climb a decent grade. You talking about the Merkava? The interesting thing about the Israelis, and speaking of kit models and military hardware, you guys do know that there have been a couple of occasions going back to Revell where they've actually been hauled in by the FBI to explain their models because some of the detail was too good. And my understanding is when the first kits of the Merkava came out, the Israeli security forces were none too thrilled because it was a good enough kit, and I think it was Tamiya. And I heard the Shillelagh was hard to track. The thing was not. It was better off just with the Canon. But my understanding is that they want to know how they got so many details right, and their attitude wasn't better spies like everybody else. Maybe a toy company, but people want good toys. I think the Israeli trophy system is on our tanks. It's an intermediate system though, because it's got a lot of limitations. Certainly better than nothing. I made a video about this on my regular channel. I mean, just on Max's models. Is the tanks my Titans of Steel, which I quit making those videos. They weren't getting any views, and but one of the channels down is Titans of Steel. I did one as a tank relevant. Now, being an infantryman, former infantryman, I realize I have as much confirmation bias as anybody else, whether they be kit models or armor assets. But I'll tell you right now, I still think tanks are very relevant on the battlefield. That doesn't mean they can't be knocked out, but the reason a tank is relevant is because if the other guy has one and you don't. It's one thing if you have total air superiority. People go, well, we're going to have air superiority. Well, that's going to be great. What are you going to do when it's 0-0 visibility? Or a 200-foot ceiling, the A-10s can't see the target, okay? Or the helicopters, okay? The aircraft need a certain amount of, the best time to attack if the enemy. This is one reason the Battle of Bulge was fought when it was. The Americans had total air superiority. The Germans knew that, so they waited for crappy weather, the ground of the Air Force. That was part of the plan, not the deciding factor, but great. And until in my division, the 101st was stuck down in Bastogne, and they knew they were going to hold out, be able to hold out when the weather broke and the Air Corps could go do its job. But the F-19. Oh yeah. You guys may remember, and Mike Mashat talked about this on his thing about desktops. They actually deliberately made an incorrect model of the stealth fighter, and so to mislead people. And I bet you that little jewel's worth a pretty penny for just that reason. But the first stealth model kits came out. All the cool kits, to be sure. I had a feeling they weren't accurate. But I remember one of them was the B-2 bomber. It had, like, instead of having the pointy, it had, like, wavy trailing edge and everything. But they've had, what's his name? Started Revell. Lou Glazer got questioned by the FBI about the, I think it was a Nautilus model. It was two. They thought it was, where'd you get all this information? He showed them just magazines and stuff. The information's out there. You can't hide it. So, yeah. I want to know about this program. And it's been a long time since I read the article, but I do know that is, I think I mentioned earlier, years ago, there was a guy who, I think like a janitor or someone, who worked at one of the defense contractors, and they had a model. I want to say it was one of the drones, like the Global Hawk or something, or the X-47B or something. But anyway, he swiped it and thought, oh, I'll get some money for this on eBay. Well, he didn't realize that some of these desktop display models that are made under secrecy oaths. You know, they're only for the contractor. No one else is supposed to see them because they're detail correct in many ways. And like the feds got involved and they arrested the guy. It was like it was a serious charge. And I think there were two of them. And so models ain't just toys, you know. I hope the Marines don't regret getting rid of their tanks. I don't think they're anticipating any near-peer threats. And frankly, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, the general made the comment that if we need armor assets, we'll call the Army. I'm like, dude, you can't. You're the Marines. You go places on ships. You can't count on there being an armor battalion, Army armor battalion around. And they may have their own job to do. They may not be able to help you. Nothing like having your own assets. What's he going to do next? Give up the close support jets? I mean, I understand tanks are expensive to move and they have limited use, but when you need them, you know, they're useless in a city. But when you need one, and accept no substitute. Oh, good gosh, we've gone over 2 hours. Good heavens, it's been a fun time. Let me read a few comments here. Stormtrooper suits. I've never built a figurine of a stormtrooper. I assume they make one. Yeah. Well, if you're right on shit like that, some tanks could be handy. Here's some trivia for you. Did you guys know that the Saturn V was actually a backup program? They never really intended to go to the moon on it. Oh, Plastic Slave. Sorry, I got a bug. I'm going to be shutting down here shortly, though, man. You have a great day. Yeah, you got that right. Generals always fight in the last war. That shiny white. You ever wonder why they even wear that armor? It never seems to work. Yeah, the Saturn V was a backup program. Originally, they thought they were going to go to the moon on a rocket called Nova that had 8 F1 engines. And then they realized it's too big, too expensive, and it'll sink on the ground under its own weight. Have you ever noticed that a lot of the systems are just older systems that keep getting beefed up? I mean, you look at the original AH-1 Cobra, and you look at the Z model they're flying now with 2 engines and 4-bladed rotors and all this other stuff. Like, good God, to barely tell that one came from the other. They got all the stuff they put on tanks that have to keep them modernized, and ships and planes and all the bumps and equipment that keeps getting tacked on. And well, it's a slippery slope, and it keeps modelers happy because you always have something new to build. Ooh, a new blister to put on my F-16, which is the modern gizmo that does this. Well, okay, what happened to the turret? There we go. Well, let's get a little noise on here. All right, guys, I guess that's about it. Not a lot of room to move. Tegan Tiger. You can see the red light come on. That's the for when you're playing laser tag with it. Well, guys, that's it for this trip. Hope you had a good time. I'm going to sign off. I'll leave the window up for a minute if you want to chat amongst yourselves. We'll see you next time. Model on.